The sun hung high in the sky over Tuskegee, Alabama, casting long shadows across the dusty training grounds. The air was thick with the scent of engine oil and the distinct aroma of burning fuel, a smell that many aspiring pilots would come to associate with freedom and flight. Among the rows of wooden barracks, Captain Elijah Eli Carter stood on the tarmac, his heart racing with anticipation. Today was the day he would take to the skies, to prove to his superiors and himself that he belonged among the ranks of the brave men who flew for their country. Eli adjusted his leather flight cap, his fingers trembling slightly as he secured it in place. He could hear the distant roar of engines and the chatter of fellow cadets, their voices a mix of excitement and anxiety. They were all here for the same reason, a burning desire to fly, to escape the confines of a world that often sought to limit them. Yet, as an African-American pilot, Eli faced an uphill battle every step of the way. The skepticism of his white superiors loomed over him like a dark cloud, a constant reminder of the racial prejudices that permeated the military. "Carter, get your head in the game," barked Lieutenant Phillips, a wiry man with sharp features and an equally sharp tongue. Eli felt the weight of the lieutenant's gaze on him, and he straightened up, forcing himself to meet Phillips' eyes. "You think this is a game? You are representing more than just yourself up there. You're flying for every black man who's ever dreamed of being in the cockpit." Eli swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I understand, sir. I won't let you down." His voice was steady, but inside, he felt a storm of nerves swirling. The expectations placed upon him felt like a weight on his shoulders, but he was determined to rise above them. As he climbed into the cockpit of the sleek P-51 Mustang, Eli took a deep breath, allowing the familiar scent of the aircraft to wash over him. He had spent countless hours studying the mechanics of flight and perfecting his skills in the simulator, but nothing compared to the real thing. With the engine roaring to life beneath him, he felt a thrill that momentarily drowned out the doubts and fears that crept into his mind. "Hey, Eli, don't forget to pull up on your first takeoff," called out his friend, Lieutenant Samuel Sam Johnson, who was stationed in the plane beside him. Sam was a jokester, always ready with a quip to lighten the mood, and Eli appreciated his presence. They had trained together, bonded over shared struggles, and forged a friendship that transcended the barriers of race. "I won't forget, Sam. Just keep your eyes on your own plane." Eli shot back with a grin, his tension easing for a moment. The camaraderie among the cadets was a small solace amidst the harsh realities they faced. They were all united by their dreams, their aspirations, and the undeniable desire to break the chains of segregation. With a nod from the ground crew, Eli taxied onto the runway, his heart pounding in rhythm with the roar of the engines. He glanced at the horizon, where the vast expanse of blue sky awaited him. The moment felt monumental, a step toward his destiny. As he accelerated down the runway, he felt the familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. The wheels lifted off the ground, and for a fleeting moment he was weightless, free from the burdens of the world below. Up in the sky, the scenery unfolded beneath him like a vibrant tapestry. The fields of Alabama stretched out in shades of green and gold, dotted with patches of wildflowers that danced in the breeze. Eli maneuvered the aircraft with precision, his instincts kicking in as he performed loops and rolls, the thrill of flight igniting a fire within him. He was no longer just a black pilot fighting against prejudice. He was a pilot, a man of the sky, and in that moment, he felt invincible. Yet, the thrill of flight was often marred by the harsh realities of the world below. As he soared through the clouds, Eli thought about the conversations he had overheard among his superiors. They doubted his abilities, questioned whether he could perform under pressure. The weight of their skepticism hung over him, but he refused to let it extinguish the fire burning in his heart. Back on the ground, Lieutenant Phillips watched Eli with a critical eye. "Let's see if he can hold his own up there," he muttered to himself, arms crossed. The lieutenant's apprehension was palpable, a reflection of the systemic racism that plagued the military. Eli knew that with every successful flight, he was not only proving his worth, but also challenging the very foundations of segregation that sought to hold him back. Meanwhile, in Germany, Major Heinrich Müller sat in a dimly lit room, polishing the medal he had recently been awarded for his bravery in combat. The medal gleamed under the flickering light, a symbol of the glory he had fought hard to achieve. His fellow pilots congratulated him, their voices filled with admiration, but deep down, a nagging doubt gnawed at his conscience. Another victory for the Luftwaffe Major, one of his comrades exclaimed, clapping him on the back. You're becoming a legend. Muller managed to smile, but it felt strained. He looked out the window, watching the distant smoke rising from the remnants of a recent airstrike. The thrill of combat had once exhilarated him. But as the war dragged on, he found himself increasingly haunted by the faces of those he had killed. The toll of war weighed heavily on him, and he struggled to reconcile his actions with his sense of morality. Are we really winning? He asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. His question hung in the air like a shadow, but his comrades dismissed it with laughter. Winning? Of course. We're the best pilots in the world, another pilot scoffed. You need to toughen up, Muller. This is war. Muller nodded, but the laughter faded into a silence that felt deafening. He wanted to raise his voice, to speak out against the violence that surrounded them, but fear gripped him. The consequences of dissent were severe, and he was acutely aware of the dangers of questioning the Nazi regime. Yet, every mission he flew left him feeling more conflicted, more lost. Back in Tuskegee, Eli landed the Mustang with a triumphant smile, the thrill of flight still coursing through his veins. He climbed out of the cockpit, heart racing, and was met by the enthusiastic cheers of his fellow cadets. They rushed over, clapping him on the back and celebrating his success. You did it, Eli. You showed them. Sam exclaimed, beaming with pride. Yeah, and I didn't crash either. Eli laughed, the relief washing over him. But as the celebration continued, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The war loomed on the horizon, and soon he would be called to face the enemy. That evening, as he prepared to leave Tuskegee, Eli sat on the porch of the modest home he shared with his younger sister, Sarah. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. It was a beautiful sight, but Eli felt a heaviness in his chest. He knew the challenges that lay ahead and the dangers of the skies. Are you scared? Sarah asked, her voice small, as she joined him on the porch. She had always looked up to her brother, and he could see the worry etched across her youthful face. Eli took a deep breath, considering her question. I'm excited, Sarah. Excited to fight for our country, to show them what we can do. But yes, there's fear too. Fear of not coming back. Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she shook her head. You have to come back, not just for me, but for everyone who believes in you. You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for justice, for equality, for all of us. Her words struck a chord deep within him, igniting a sense of purpose that drove him. I won't let you down, Sarah. I promise. I'm going to do everything I can to make a difference. They shared a long embrace, a moment of connection that transcended the fear and uncertainty of the world around them. Eli felt the weight of his sister's hopes resting on his shoulders, and he knew he had to fight not only for his country, but for the future they both dreamed of, one where they would be seen as equals in a world that often tried to silence them. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Eli looked up, his heart filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. He was about to embark on a journey that would test his limits, challenge his beliefs, and ultimately shape the course of his life. Little did he know that his path would soon intersect with that of a German pilot, a man grappling with his own demons, and together they would navigate the complexities of war, honor, and redemption. Eli Carter stood at the edge of the airfield, the chill of the European morning biting through his leather flight jacket. The sky above him was a vast expanse of blue, but it felt heavy with the weight of expectation. His squadron, the 332nd Fighter Group, had arrived in Italy not long ago, and while the thrill of being in combat was exhilarating, it was shadowed by the palpable tension among his fellow pilots. The whispers, the sidelong glances, the lingering doubts. They all spoke of an insidious undertone of racism that had followed them from America. "Hey, Eli, you ready for this?" Came the voice of Lieutenant Charles McGee, his closest friend and a fellow Tuskegee pilot. McGee's tone was light, but Eli could sense the underlying anxiety. They had all heard the stories about how their white counterparts viewed them, how their talents were often dismissed because of the color of their skin. "I've been ready my whole life, Chuck," Eli replied, forcing a smile. "Just waiting for them to let us prove it." From the corner of his eye, Eli noticed a group of white pilots leaning against a hangar, their laughter ringing out like a mocking chorus. He recognized one of them, Lieutenant Johnny McCauley, a brash pilot whose arrogance was only matched by his ignorance. Eli couldn't help but feel the heat rise in his chest as McCauley gestured toward him, whispering something to his friends, their laughter erupting once more. "Just ignore them," McGee said, sensing Eli's frustration. "They'll see soon enough what we're made of." "Yeah, but it shouldn't have to come to that," Eli muttered, his eyes fixed on the group. "We should be fighting for our country, not for their respect." Before their conversation could continue, their commanding officer, Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., approached. With his tall stature and composed demeanor, he exuded authority and confidence. "Pilots, gather around," he called, his voice cutting through the morning haze. As the men assembled, Eli felt a mix of pride and apprehension. Colonel Davis had fought hard to get them to this point, to be recognized as equals in a war that demanded the best, regardless of race. "Today," Davis began, "we will be flying our first combat mission over enemy territory. Intelligence reports indicate increased German activity in the area, and you will provide air support for the ground units." A murmur of anticipation spread through the group. Eli's heart raced. This was it, the moment he had trained for, the chance to show the world what the Tuskegee Airmen could do. Yet, as he scanned the faces of his fellow pilots, he noticed a flicker of doubt in some of their eyes. "Remember," Davis continued, "we are not just fighting for victory. We are fighting for our dignity. Trust in each other, and we will succeed. Together." The words resonated with Eli, infusing him with determination. He exchanged a glance with McGee, and they both nodded, silently agreeing to stand together against whatever challenges lay ahead. As they climbed into their P-51 Mustangs, Eli felt the familiar rush of adrenaline course through him. He had always loved the sensation of being in the cockpit, the roar of the engine echoing in his ears, the world below shrinking as he ascended into the clouds. But this time felt different. The stakes were higher, and the weight of history loomed large. "Eli, let's show them what we're made of," McGee said, his voice crackling over the radio as they prepared for takeoff. "Absolutely. Let's make them remember our names," Eli replied, gripping the controls tightly. As the planes roared to life, the ground crew waved them off, and Eli felt a rush of pride swell in his chest. They were no longer just cadets training in Alabama. They were soldiers, ready to fight for their country and their place in history. The flight to the target area was filled with a mix of excitement and tension. Eli focused on the landscape below, the patchwork of fields and villages that stretched out beneath him. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a mission. It was a chance to redefine who they were in the eyes of the military and the world. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life. "All units, this is command. We have visual on enemy aircraft approaching from the north. Prepare for engagement." Eli's heart raced. "Here we go," he said, adrenaline surging through him as he tightened his grip on the controls. "Stay sharp, everyone." As they entered the fray, the sky erupted into chaos. German fighters darted through the clouds like predators, and Eli's instincts kicked in. He maneuvered his Mustang with precision, weaving through the aerial ballet of combat. Everywhere he looked, planes were twisting, turning, and firing, the sharp crack of gunfire echoing in the cockpit. "Eli, 2:00, McGee shouted, pointing toward a German plane that was zeroing in on one of their squadron mates. "On it," Eli responded, his heart pounding as he locked onto the enemy aircraft. With a swift movement, he pulled the trigger, sending a stream of bullets toward the German fighter. The plane erupted in flames, spiraling down into the abyss below. "Nice shot," McGee cheered over the radio. But Eli couldn't revel in the victory. He had seen the faces of the men he was shooting at, and it weighed heavily on his heart. Each enemy plane was a pilot, just like him, with dreams and fears. The battle raged on, and Eli fought valiantly, his skills shining through as he engaged multiple enemy aircraft. But amidst the chaos, a sudden explosion rocked the sky, and Eli's stomach dropped as he witnessed one of his closest friends, Lieutenant Clarence Buddy Johnson, go down in flames. "No, Buddy!" Eli screamed, his voice lost in the cacophony of war. He felt a sickening twist in his gut as he watched the wreckage fall from the sky. In that instant, the thrill of combat faded, replaced by a grim realization of the cost of war. "Eli, focus!" McGee shouted, pulling Eli back to the present. "We need to regroup. Stick with me." Eli shook his head, forcing back the wave of grief that threatened to overwhelm him. He couldn't let Buddy's sacrifice be in vain. "You're right. Let's get back in formation." They dove back into the fray, the adrenaline dulling the pain of loss. But Eli felt a change in him. He fought not just for victory, but for the memory of his fallen comrade. Each maneuver was executed with newfound determination, each shot fired infused with a sense of purpose. As the battle began to subside, Eli and his squadron regrouped in the sky, and they headed back toward their base. The moment of euphoria that should have accompanied their success was overshadowed by the heavy sorrow of loss. Eli felt the weight of grief pressing down on him, and it was as if the sky itself was mourning with him. "Eli, we did good today," McGee said, trying to lift Eli's spirits as they landed. Buddy would have been proud. Eli nodded, but the ache in his heart remained. "We may have won the battle, but we lost a brother. I can't shake that." As they disembarked from their planes, Eli noticed the stares of some of the white pilots lingering on them. The tension that had initially clouded their arrival was still present, a silent reminder of the prejudices they faced. But Eli knew that their performance in the air would speak volumes, and he was determined to turn the respect into something more. "Let's show them we're not just here to fight. We're here to win," Eli said, his voice steady. "Our fight is not just in the skies, but on the ground too." With a renewed sense of purpose driving him, Eli walked toward the hangar, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The war was far from over, and he was prepared to fight. Not just for victory, but to forge a path for those who would come after him, proving that courage and honor knew no color. Eli Carter sat in the cockpit of his P-51 Mustang, the roar of the engine vibrating through his bones. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the sprawling fields of Europe below them. He and his squadron had just returned from a successful mission, a daring rescue operation that had become the talk of the airfield. The adrenaline still coursed through him as he recalled the moment they spotted their downed comrade, a white pilot from another squadron, stranded amidst enemy territory. The mission had been fraught with danger, but Eli and his men had executed a flawless extraction, and the thrill of their victory was palpable. As they landed, their fellow pilots greeted them with a mix of awe and newfound respect. Eli stepped out of his aircraft, his chest swelling with pride. "We showed them today, didn't we?" he called out to his squadron mates, who were gathering around him, laughter and excitement bubbling over. "Yeah, we did," shouted Lieutenant James Jimmy Lawson, a wiry young man with a quick smile. "I thought I was done for when those German fighters came in hot, but you flew right over them like a damn eagle." Eli chuckled, the tension of the mission melting away. "It was teamwork, Jimmy. We had each other's backs up there. That's what makes us a squadron." "Speaking of which," said Sergeant Malcolm Mal Reynolds, a burly man with a heart of gold, "let's celebrate. I heard the mess hall is serving fried chicken tonight. They might even have some real coffee." The men laughed and began to head toward the mess hall, their spirits high. As they walked, Eli felt a sense of camaraderie that had been growing among the pilots. The war had forged bonds that transcended the racial barriers that had once divided them. They were becoming a family, united in their shared purpose. Inside the mess hall, the atmosphere was lively. The smell of fried chicken and collard greens wafted through the air, mingling with the chatter of pilots recounting their own harrowing tales. Eli found himself sitting at a long table with his squadron mates, the chatter surrounding him a comforting hum. "All right, Eli," Mal said, grinning widely. "You've got to tell us how you managed to pull off that last maneuver. I swear I saw you flip upside down to dodge that German." Eli laughed, shaking his head. "It was a calculated risk. I just knew they wouldn't expect me to go inverted. Plus, I had Jimmy covering my six. I wouldn't have done it without him." Modest as ever, Jimmy chimed in, raising his glass of lemonade. "To Eli Carter, the man who dances with death in the skies." "To Eli," the others echoed, raising their glasses in a toast. As they celebrated, Eli took a moment to look around the room. The laughter and joy were a stark contrast to the chaos that raged beyond the safety of the airfield. He felt a strange duality. While they were all pilots, fighting for their country, they were also men grappling with the harsh realities of war and prejudice. Eli's heart swelled with hope, yet a lingering doubt nagged at him. Would this newfound respect last? Could they sustain this bond when faced with the enemy in the air? Meanwhile, across the ocean in Germany, Major Heinrich Muller sat in his quarters, the weight of his own thoughts heavy on his shoulders. He stared at the medals adorning his uniform, each a reminder of battles fought and lives taken. The accolades felt hollow now. Like the distant echoes of a past, he could no longer reconcile with his conscience. The sound of footsteps interrupted his reverie. It was his wingman, Captain Anton Weiss, a jovial man who had always been quick to share a laugh. "Heinrich, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's gnawing at you?" Muller sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The more I think about it, the more I question our actions. We're not just flying against enemy planes. We're taking lives, innocent lives." "War is war, my friend," Anton replied, leaning against the doorframe. "You know the stakes. We're fighting for our homeland, for our future. But at what cost?" Muller shot back, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I can't shake the images of the faces of the men we've shot down. I've lost count of how many families are shattered because of us. It doesn't sit right with me anymore." Anton's expression shifted, seriousness replacing the earlier levity. "You're not alone in feeling this way, but we have duties to fulfill. You fought bravely, and you're respected among our ranks. Don't let sentiment cloud your judgment." Muller shook his head, feeling the distance grow between him and his comrade. "Respect? Is that what this is about? I used to think so, but now it feels like a facade. I'm tired of being a cog in this machine that destroys lives." Anton straightened up, concern etched across his face. "Just remember, Heinrich, the war will end. We all want to go home, but we need to stay focused." As Muller watched Anton leave, a sense of restlessness settled over him. The looming mission against the Tuskegee squadron weighed heavily on his mind. He had heard of their growing reputation as fierce and skilled pilots, men who defied the odds and who, like himself, were fighting against a backdrop of prejudice. He couldn't help but feel a strange kinship with them, as if their struggles mirrored his own. Back at the airfield, Eli and his squadron continued their celebration. But in the back of his mind, Eli felt the tension of the impending mission against Muller's squadron. They had heard whispers about the ruthless German ace, known for his aggressive tactics and high kill count. Eli's heart raced at the thought of facing someone with such a reputation. "Hey, Eli, you all right?" Jimmy asked, concern evident in his tone. "You've been awfully quiet." Eli forced a smile, trying to shake off the weight of his thoughts. "Just thinking about the upcoming mission. We'll be facing Muller's men. They're not just any pilots. They're seasoned veterans." "Yeah, but we're not just any pilots either," Mal interjected, determination in his voice. We've earned our place up here. We've proven ourselves time and time again. We can take them." Eli nodded, the fire of resolve igniting within him. "You're right. We've come too far to back down now. We'll show them what the Tuskegee Airmen are made of." As the night wore on, the laughter and camaraderie continued, but Eli couldn't shake the feeling that the coming battle would be different. It was more than just a fight in the air. It was a clash of ideals, a test of everything they had fought for, not just against the enemy, but for their own dignity and respect. The stakes had never felt higher. The day had arrived when Eli Carter and his squadron would face the formidable Major Heinrich Muller and his skilled Luftwaffe pilots. In the dim light of dawn, Eli stood in front of his aircraft, the roar of engines and the smell of fuel swirling around him like a storm. He could feel the weight of expectation and anxiety pressing down on his shoulders. This was not just another mission. It was a reckoning. The Tuskegee Airmen had faced skepticism and prejudice since their training began, but today they would prove their worth in the skies above France. As Eli tightened the straps of his flight helmet, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He thought of the long nights spent studying aerial tactics, the grueling training, and the camaraderie that had formed among his fellow pilots. Each one had a story, a reason for fighting. For Eli, it was about more than just serving his country. It was about breaking barriers and changing perceptions. He glanced over at his friends, the men he had come to trust with his life. Their faces were set with determination, but he could also see the flicker of fear in their eyes. "Hey, Eli," called out his co-pilot, Lieutenant Marcus Johnson, breaking through his thoughts. "You ready to show those German bastards what we're made of?" Eli turned to Marcus, a small smile creeping onto his face. "You know it. Just remember to watch my six out there, all right?" "Always," Marcus replied, his tone serious. "Just keep your head in the game. We've trained for this." The squadron gathered for a final briefing. Their commander, Colonel Benjamin Davis, stood before them, his presence commanding respect. "Men, today we engage in a critical battle," he began, his voice steady. "Intelligence reports indicate that Muller himself will lead the attack. This is our chance to not only defend our skies, but to make history. Remember the sacrifices made before us. Let's show them who we are." The pilots nodded, their spirits lifted by the colonel's words. Eli could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins as the briefing concluded. One by one, the pilots climbed into their aircraft, engines roaring to life. Eli took a deep breath, his heart racing in anticipation. He could hear the radio crackling with chatter as they prepared for takeoff. Once airborne, Eli felt the familiar thrill of flight wash over him. The clouds stretched out below like a vast ocean, and the sun peeked through, casting a golden hue on the battlefield ahead. He maneuvered his P-51 Mustang, feeling the power of the machine beneath him. "This is it," he whispered to himself, tightening his grip on the controls. As they approached the designated area, the atmosphere shifted. The tension was palpable, and Eli could sense the weight of history hanging in the air. Suddenly, the call came through the radio. "Bandits at 12 o'clock. Engage." Eli's heart raced as he locked eyes with Marcus. "Let's do this," he shouted, and they dove into the fray. The sky erupted into chaos as the Americans and Germans clashed in a deadly ballet of metal and fire. Eli's instincts kicked in as he maneuvered his aircraft, dodging incoming fire and returning shots at the enemy. In the midst of the dogfight, Eli spotted Muller's iconic aircraft, a sleek black fighter that seemed to cut through the air with lethal precision. He could feel a surge of adrenaline as he locked onto his target. The world around him faded. It was just him and Muller now, locked in a battle that felt both personal and historical. The two planes danced through the sky, weaving in and out of clouds, the sound of gunfire echoing in Eli's ears. He could see Muller's intense gaze through the cockpit, a look of determination mixed with something else. Was it hesitation? In that moment, time seemed to slow as their eyes met across the divide of war. Eli's heart pounded in his chest, recognizing the man on the other side not just as an enemy, but as a fellow pilot caught in the storm of conflict. "Eli, watch out!" Marcus's voice broke through the haze of focus, pulling Eli back to the present. He quickly banked left, narrowly avoiding a barrage of bullets from another German fighter. "Stick together. We can take them," Marcus urged. Eli nodded, adrenaline surging as they regrouped. The intensity of the battle escalated, with planes spiraling down in flames around them. The chaos was overwhelming, but Eli's resolve only strengthened. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for every African-American pilot who had faced discrimination and doubt. This was his moment to show the world what the Tuskegee Airmen could do. As the battle raged on, Eli's aircraft took a hit. The jolt rattled him, but he quickly assessed the damage. "I'm good. I'm still in the fight," he called over the radio, his voice steady despite the turmoil. He spotted Muller once more, his focus unwavering. This was it. He had to engage. With renewed determination, Eli dove toward Muller, lining up his shot. But in that crucial moment, something shifted within Muller. The German ace hesitated, the weight of his conscience battling against the instinct to shoot. Eli could see it in his eyes, the internal struggle that mirrored his own. "Fire, damn it!" One of Muller's wingmen shouted, urging him on. But Muller's finger hovered above the trigger, caught in a moment of moral reckoning. The hesitation cost him dearly. In a split second, Eli's plane was hit. The impact sent his aircraft into a violent spiral. "No! Eli!" Marcus screamed over the radio. But the world around Eli was rapidly fading into chaos. As his plane spiraled down, Eli fought to regain control, his mind racing. Memories flooded his thoughts. His sister's voice urging him to fight for justice, the camaraderie of his squadron, and the faces of those who believed in him. He gritted his teeth, determined to survive this. But the aircraft was losing altitude fast, and as the ground loomed closer, Eli's heart sank. He could feel the weight of history, of expectations, and of the sacrifices made by so many. Just as he braced for impact, his vision blurred, and the world around him faded to black. In the sky above, Muller watched in horror as Eli's aircraft plummeted. The realization of what he had just witnessed hit him like a punch to the gut. He had hesitated, and now Eli Carter, a man he had come to see as more than just an enemy, was falling from the sky. The battle continued to rage around him, but he felt a profound emptiness take root in his chest. The lines between right and wrong, enemy and ally, began to blur in a way he had never expected. As the sounds of war faded into the distance, Eli's fate hung in the balance, leaving the outcome of this clash of titans uncertain. Would he emerge from the ashes of this conflict, or would his story end here, lost in the depths of history? Only time would reveal what lay ahead, but one thing was certain. The war had changed them all, and the true nature of heroism would soon be tested in ways they could never have anticipated. The sun hung low over the desolate landscape, casting long shadows as the remnants of battle began to settle. The air was thick with the acrid scent of burnt metal and the distant echoes of gunfire. In the heart of the makeshift camp, Eli Carter's squadron gathered, their faces drawn and weary, each man grappling with the weight of what they had just endured. "Eli's gone," whispered Private Thompson, his voice barely rising above the murmurs of the group. The somber reality of their presumed loss hung over them like a shroud. Eli had been their leader, their beacon of hope amidst the chaos, and now, in a single moment of combat, he was gone. The men stood in a circle, their eyes searching each other's faces for solace, but finding none. "He was more than a pilot," piped up Sergeant Lewis, his voice breaking as he spoke. "He was family." The squadron had come together through shared dreams and struggles, a brotherhood forged by the fire of adversity. Each man had known Eli not just as a commander, but as a friend who had inspired them to rise above the prejudice they faced, not only from the enemy, but from within their own ranks. The loss felt insurmountable. "I can't believe it," Thompson muttered, shaking his head. "We were supposed to win this for him. We can't let his sacrifice go in vain." Then we fight, Lewis declared, a fire igniting in his chest despite the grief that threatened to consume him. We honor him by flying harder than ever. We show the world what the Tuskegee Airmen are made of. A murmur of agreement rippled through the group, their collective grief morphing into a fierce resolve. Eli's spirit lingered in the air, urging them to push forward, to fight not just for victory, but for each other. They were a squadron of men against the odds, but they were also a family united by a singular purpose. Meanwhile, in the cockpit of a German fighter plane, Major Heinrich Müller sat in silence, the weight of his actions pressing heavily upon him. He stared into the horizon, where the sun dipped below the jagged line of the earth. His heart was a tumult of emotions, pride, guilt, and confusion intertwined as he replayed the moment he had fired upon Eli's aircraft. The look in Eli's eyes, a mixture of surprise and defiance, haunted him. How had it come to this? In the aftermath of the battle, Muller found himself seeking solace in the company of his fellow pilots, though the camaraderie felt hollow. They celebrated their victories, but he couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in his gut. The Tuskegee pilots had shown remarkable bravery, and yet he had been taught to view them as mere enemies. Another day, another kill. Heinrich, his comrade, Captain Weiss, boasted as they gathered in the mess hall. "We're making history, my friend." Muller forced a smile, but inside, he felt a storm brewing. "Is that what this is?" "History," he replied, his voice laced with bitterness. "What about the lives we've taken? What about the families we've destroyed?" Weiss chuckled, raising his glass. "You're starting to sound like a coward. We're soldiers. This is our duty." "Duty," Muller shot back, his voice rising. "Is it our duty to kill without questioning the morality of our actions? To paint ourselves as saviors while we destroy? I can't live with that anymore." The laughter around the table faded, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Weiss eyed Muller with a mix of concern and disdain. "You need to toughen up, Heinrich. This is war. We're all just pawns in a much larger game." But Muller could no longer accept this narrative. The faces of the men he had killed flashed through his mind. Innocent lives lost, dreams shattered. And now Eli, a man who had fought with honor and courage, had become another casualty in this brutal conflict. As days passed, the Tuskegee squadron continued their missions, bolstered by the memory of Eli. They flew with a renewed sense of purpose, their maneuvers more precise, their camaraderie stronger. Each dogfight was a tribute to their fallen leader, a testament to their resilience. The skies became their sanctuary, where they could escape the grim realities of the war below. Back in the POW camp, Eli's world had shrunk to the walls that confined him, yet the spirit of hope remained undeterred. He awoke each day to the harsh sounds of guards barking orders and the clinking of chains, but he found solace in the company of his fellow prisoners. They shared stories, not just of their past but of their dreams for the future, weaving a tapestry of resilience amidst the despair. "Remember the day we graduated?" Eli began, a wistful smile breaking through the gloom. "We thought we'd set the skies on fire." "Yeah, and now look at us," Private Jenkins responded, his tone a mix of frustration and humor. "Stuck in a cage like birds." Laughter erupted among the men, a momentary reprieve from their harsh reality. It was in these moments that Eli felt a flicker of hope, a belief that they could rise above their circumstances. They began to devise plans, sharing ideas for an escape. Each whispered conversation felt like a rebellion against their captors, a reclaiming of their agency. As the days turned into weeks, Eli's spirit never wavered. He took it upon himself to encourage his comrades, reminding them of their strength. "We're not just prisoners, we're warriors. We fought for our country, and we will fight to reclaim our freedom." Little did Eli know that his words were reaching beyond the confines of the camp, echoing in the mind of Major Muller. The Major had been wrestling with his conscience, and the stories of the Tuskegee Airmen had begun to stir something deep within him. He could no longer ignore the truth of what he had done. One evening, as he sat alone in his quarters, he made a decision that would change everything. He would help the prisoners. The thought of Eli and his squadron fighting against the very ideals he had once upheld ignited a sense of urgency within him. It was time to atone for his past. As Muller quietly gathered information about the guards and the camp layout, he felt a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through his veins. He knew the risks involved, but the prospect of aiding those he had once viewed as enemies filled him with purpose. He had to make things right. In the following weeks, he slipped notes to the prisoners, providing them with crucial information about guard shifts and potential escape routes. Each piece of paper became a lifeline, a thread connecting him to Eli and his comrades. He could feel the weight of history bearing down upon him. And with every act of defiance, he was reclaiming his own humanity. Eli, unaware of the unexpected ally working from within the enemy ranks, continued to foster the hope that one day they would be free. The bond among the prisoners grew stronger as they prepared for the day they would reclaim their lives. Fueled by the stories of bravery and sacrifice that had come to define them, in the shadows of war, unexpected alliances were forming. Eli and Muller were on a collision course, each man driven by their own motivations, yet bound by a shared desire for redemption and freedom. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge everything they believed about honor, loyalty, and the true meaning of bravery. The air was thick with tension as Eli Carter and his fellow prisoners of war huddled in the dim light of the makeshift hideout they had managed to create within the confines of the camp. They had spent weeks meticulously planning their escape, every detail carefully plotted amid the oppressive gloom that surrounded them. Now, as they prepared to execute their plan, the reality of their situation weighed heavily on their minds. Eli, a natural leader among his peers, could feel the nervous energy crackling in the air. He looked around at the faces of his comrades, men who had fought valiantly alongside him, now reduced to mere shadows of their former selves, thin, weary, and haunted by the specter of their captivity. They had all endured unimaginable hardships, but the flicker of hope in their eyes was enough to ignite his own determination. "All right, listen up." Eli's voice cut through the murmurs. "We stick to the plan. We move fast, stay quiet, and if we encounter trouble, we improvise. Follow my lead, and we'll make it out of here." The men nodded, a mixture of fear and resolve etched on their faces. They had faced death countless times in the sky, but the ground was a different battlefield, one filled with uncertainty and unknown dangers. As they slipped out of the cramped quarters, the night air greeted them with a chill. The camp was eerily silent, a haunting reminder of the grim fate that awaited them should they be caught. Eli led the way, his senses heightened, every rustle of leaves or distant footstep sending adrenaline coursing through his veins. Suddenly, as they neared the perimeter fence, a shout rang out from behind them. "Halt! Who goes there?" It was a guard, his voice sharp with authority. Before Eli could react, shots rang out. The prisoners scattered, diving for cover, heart pounding. Eli turned to see one of his comrades, a young man named James, struggling to get to his feet. "Get down!" Eli yelled, rushing to his side just as another bullet whizzed past them. "Eli, I can't!" James gasped, fear etched in his features. "Yes, you can," Eli insisted, gripping James' arm to pull him up. "We have to move. Now!" The two men stumbled forward, dodging behind a stack of crates as gunfire erupted around them, the sound echoing in the stillness of the night. They could hear the shouts of guards growing closer, their boots pounding against the ground like a war drum. Over there, Eli pointed toward a narrow gap in the fence, a possible escape route. It was risky, but they had no choice. "We make a break for it." With a nod of determination, James and Eli sprinted toward the opening. Just as they reached it, a flash of movement caught Eli's eye. He turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows, a German officer, Major Heinrich Muller, the very pilot whose name had become synonymous with fear among the Tuskegee Airmen. Eli's heart raced, caught between instinctual fear and the bewildering realization that Muller was not there to shoot them. Instead, the German pilot, with his striking blue eyes, appeared to be searching for them. The look of urgency on Muller's face was palpable. "Get down!" Eli hissed, pushing James behind a crate. But Muller raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to fight," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I want to help you." Eli's mind raced. "Help? Why would you help us? You're the enemy." "I know," Muller snapped, glancing back toward the guards. "But I'm not the man I used to be. I've seen too much." "Save it." Eli interrupted, his distrust evident. "You expect us to believe you're suddenly on our side?" "I'm the son of a Holocaust survivor," Muller said, his voice edged with desperation. "My mother taught me the value of fighting against tyranny, against oppression. I can't stand by and let this happen anymore." Eli hesitated, the weight of Muller's words sinking in. Could this be true? The man who had hunted his comrades in the skies, now standing before him, claiming a change of heart. "Why should we trust you?" James asked, his voice trembling. "You could be lying." Muller took a step closer, his eyes earnest. "Because I can get you out. I have access to a truck that can take you to safety. But you have to trust me." Eli exchanged a wary glance with James, the tension palpable. "If this is a trap..." "It's not," Muller insisted. "I'm risking my life to help you. I know the consequences if I'm caught, but you have to hurry." Time was not on their side. Eli weighed the options, feeling the urgency of their situation. He knew that staying put would likely lead them back to captivity or worse. "All right," Eli finally said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "Lead the way. But one wrong move and I swear..." "Understood," Muller nodded, relief washing over his features. He turned, glancing over his shoulder to ensure the coast was clear, then gestured for them to follow. They moved quickly, navigating through the shadows, Muller leading them through a series of narrow alleys and hidden paths. Eli and James remained tense, every instinct screaming to be cautious. But as they progressed, the more they began to feel a strange alliance forming in the midst of chaos. Finally, they arrived at a secluded area where a truck was parked, its engine quietly idling. The sight of it sent a surge of hope through Eli's chest. "Get in," Muller ordered. Looking around nervously, the prisoners climbed into the back of the truck, and Eli took a moment to glance back at Muller. "If this is a trick..." "It's not," Muller replied, his expression resolute. "I promise." As the truck rumbled to life and began to roll away from the camp, Eli felt a mix of emotions: relief, mistrust, and an unexpected sense of camaraderie with the man who had once been his enemy. They drove into the night, the shadows of both war and humanity looming large behind them. Hours passed as they traveled through the darkened countryside, the tension slowly dissipating as the miles stretched between them and the camp. Eli felt himself starting to breathe a little easier, but the questions remained, gnawing at him. "Why did you really do this?" Eli finally asked, breaking the silence that had settled in the truck. "What's in it for you?" Muller sighed, the weight of his past evident in his expression. "Redemption, I suppose. I've done terrible things in the name of duty. I can't change what I've done, but I can try to make it right. Helping you, helping others, feels like a start." James shifted uncomfortably. "And what happens when we're free? You think we'll just forget that you shot at us?" Eli shot him a glance, a mix of annoyance and understanding. "We're not here to judge. Not yet, anyway." Muller looked down, the guilt evident in his eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you understand that I'm trying to fight against the very ideology I once followed. It's not easy to break away from everything I've known." Eli pondered this, the complexities of war and morality swirling in his mind. "None of this is easy," he said finally, "but maybe we can find a way to understand each other. We're all human after all." As the truck moved further into the night, the lines that once divided them began to blur. Eli couldn't shake the feeling that this unexpected alliance might be the key to not just their survival, but a greater understanding of what it meant to fight against oppression, regardless of the uniform they wore. In the face of war, they were all seeking redemption, each in their own way. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Eli felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could forge something new from the ashes of their pasts.